Hey, this is Rick Hansen on Amazing Greats. We have the great opportunity each and every episode to share the stories, the life stories, and some pretty awesome people, authors and athletes and actors, musicians, and business leaders. And today is definitely one of the greatest. Major League Baseball star Dave Dravecky is with us. His journey is an extraordinary one from the very beginning to today. His powerful baseball journey set the stage for a lifetime ministry. Let's find out about this baseball story.
On July 4th, 1987, Giants general manager Al Rosen was finally able to obtain Dave Dravecky, acquiring the left-hander in a trade from San Diego.
That was an interesting time in my life because, I'd just come from the Padres, and they were in last place. And I get traded to the Giants, who are in first place. And we go into the playoffs in 1987 against the Cardinals, and things are going great. I pitched the two best games of my career.
In the 1987 NLCS, Dravecky dominated the Cardinals, pitching a total of 15 innings, allowing 1 run and striking out 14. Entering 1988 in the prime of his career, Dravecky seemed destined to be the staff ace of the Giants for years to come.
So opening day, Roger Craig hands me the baseball. I was so fired up and thinking, man, this is going to be my year. And by September of 1988, I was being diagnosed with cancer in my left arm, halfway between the shoulder and the elbow, and the doctors were telling me outside of a miracle, I would never pitch again.
Oh man, what a great afternoon we have here today with a legend left-handed pitcher from the major leagues who played at the Padres and the Giants. And he is here with us today to tell his story. It's an amazing baseball story, but it's also an amazing life story and a wonderful Jesus journey that we get to talk about today. And thank you, Dave Dravecky, for being here with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Rick. And by the way, when you introduced me as a legend, only in my own mind. But I don't know about anybody else.
No, that's
buddy.
not true. I think you are a notable left-handed pitcher, what made you even more notable is what we're going to talk about here in the unfolding moments about that comeback pitch when you return to baseball from your health diagnosis and treatment. And so let's get started with that. Let's start. First of all, I want to jump back to your childhood. Did you come from like a Christian home? Where was your faith based in your early life?
Well, in my early life, I was raised in the Catholic Church. So God was very present. We were, my parents were extremely intentional in getting us to church every Sunday. I was an altar boy for 8 years in parochial school. I passed on parochial high school only because the high school that I could go to back then didn't have a baseball program. So I ended up at the public high school. And so growing up in those formidable years, I was extremely grateful for that foundation in my life. And obviously, things would transpire moving down the road. But from a spiritual perspective, let's just say that God was in the picture. But at that point in my life, although I will tell you, something really interesting happened when I think I was around 11 to 13 years of age. And I remember being in church at the parochial school. Our church that we went to was there as well. And so I remembered, I don't know if I was coming out of the church doors and it was recess, if I was coming out from going to confession, or if we were just in there for some reason as a class, and then we got released into the playground area for recess. And I'll never forget walking out of the doors of the church on my own. And I don't share this very often, and I don't know why, but I got stopped dead in my tracks. And it was like I ran into a presence, and I had no idea what it was. And I have never forgotten that moment because it felt like God stopped me in that moment. And I sensed I actually sensed that it was his presence. And then within 5 seconds, you know, after I had sensed that, I'm running out to the field where we're playing football, and I proceed to get in a fight with one of the kids. So go figure about my spiritual journey as a young 12 or 13-year-old kid beating God, you know. But at the end of the day, I look back on that moment because I am a firm believer that it's not about praying a prayer and walking down an aisle. God meets us in very unique and sometimes strange places to get our attention. And whether he gets our attention in that moment or he gets our attention down the road and reminds us of that is a mystery to me. But I was extremely grateful now looking back for that moment.
I love that you share that story because as you're saying that, I had kind of a similar little thing going on in my youth. And I must have been 12, 13, 14, something like that. And it was coming home from church with my mom, driving the car. And it was kind of one of those clearly present moments of God. And it was temporary. But what he said in this moment was that because I was struggling with my social life and all the things that you go through in adolescence. And at that point, the clear message was, I'm going to take care of you. And then, like you say, kind of life went on, and that was forgotten. And I was a Catholic kid too, so it all came in. And I firmly believe that that Catholic background was instrumental with me as well as you're describing with you. But it does change as time goes on, and we get busy and we do things that are very secular along the way. And but in 1981, you had a come to Jesus moment, a time when there was really a relationship with Jesus. Can you explain in detail what that moment was like?
Yeah, it was really powerful because I believe God was setting the stage 2 years prior to that experience. And a lot of it revolved around not playing in the States, but playing winter ball in Colombia, South America.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I was under the impression going to Colombia, to Barranquilla, that I was going to be going to a tropical paradise. And the first year my wife joined me, Jan joined me, and it was a far cry from a tropical paradise. And it was an industrial town. And we had never seen so much poverty in our whole lives. And we struggled so much with it. But in the context of that struggle, Jan was questioning the very existence of God, because how could a loving God allow this to happen? And from my perspective, I'm like, holy smokes, this is scary. I'm running towards God for protection. I'm running towards God for safety. And so as a result of that, I started asking questions and began somewhat of a search down there with a small group of guys that were, gathering and spending time talking about their faith. And so anyway, that year passes and, we just move forward, and it's now 1980, and I'm being asked to go back to Colombia, South America, when I made a promise to my wife I'd never go back after the first year. And they called up and said, Dave, we really want you to go. And so I said, okay, the ball club calls and says you go. They consider you a prospect, even though they're not telling you that, you go. So Jan looked at me and said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going with you this time. Well, now I get down there and these guys are gathering for a Bible study. And I'm like, I'm all in because I know where I'm going after my first year experience. And it was scary. And I'm going back down there because I am going to try and show these guys I'm worthy enough to stay in their organization and move up the ladder. Well, as a result of that, I started hearing these young men talk about their faith in God and their personal relationship with Jesus. And that was foreign to me. I mean, it wasn't that I was unaware of Jesus, or, we had Christmas. I knew the baby was born. We had Easter. I knew there was a resurrection, and I knew he went to the cross. But all of a sudden, I'm hearing these guys talk about personal relationship, and it was the coolest experience. So that leads up to then what happens in 1981. And that's when I was traded from the Pittsburgh Pirates to the San Diego Padres, and they shipped me off to Amarillo, Texas. And in Amarillo, Texas, my roommate, the first day I got there, staying at the Howard Johnson Inn, or hotel, whatever it was called back then, HJ, Howard Johnson's. And so he's my roommate. And over the first few days, we get through the niceties and all that. But then I noticed, as those days passed, that all of a sudden he was reading literature that was very interesting to me. And one of them was the Handbook on Athletic Perfection by Wes Neal. And I didn't know this, but I'm thinking I want to be the perfect athlete, so that must be the book I need to read. And it was just a little pamphlet, and I hate reading books, but when it was so thin and so small, I thought I could read it. Yeah. And so I asked him about it, and he goes, "Oh, you're interested in Christian stuff?" I said, "Oh, that's Christian stuff." And I said, "I don't know what's in the book." He said, "Well, it's all about, being the perfect athlete, but it's from a spiritual perspective." So he gently and tenderly took me on this journey and eventually challenged me to read the Bible to discover who I was in relationship to God. And it was there on that journey that I opened up the scriptures for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And actually, I'll never forget, back a year before that in Buffalo, New York, after being in Columbia, the first year, and now it's 1980, I'm in Buffalo, New York. I remember being on the road with Bob Weissmiller, who was a pitcher on the Bison's team, and he was my roommate, and he was a veteran, been in the minor leagues for about 7 years. And he had left to go to the store to get some water and some snacks and stuff. And I went into the drawer of the hotel, and I pulled out the Bible, and I thought, I think I'm going to look at this and just see what's in it. Then I saw him coming to the door to come in, and I threw it back in the drawer and hid it. So now here I am with Byron's challenge, and that challenge was one I thought, why would I not? I think I'm a Christian, even though I don't go for the born again stuff, because I actually told him when he said, "Are you born again?" I said, "No, I'm not into that Jesus freak stuff." So,
yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's rather ironic as we sit here and talk, I'm a Jesus freak. So
now
anyway,
you are, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. But anyway, it was through reading the scripture that I discovered who I was in relationship to God and who He is. And it was through that process that the scriptures revealed to me that I was a sinner. And there was no argument there. I knew who I was when I looked in the mirror. But I also came face to face with a passage that scared me. For the wage of sin is death. And I didn't understand what that meant. And so Byron so gently shared with me, "Dave, if you're born once, you're going to die twice. But if you're born twice, you'll only die once." And I said, "Dude, what the heck does that mean?" He said, "We all are born physically, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, if you don't deal with the spiritual thing, which is what we're dealing with right now, and you die, you're only born once, you die twice.
Oh, man.
You die a physical death and you die a spiritual death. But if you're born twice," I said, "Oh, so if I'm born physically, which I know I am, but I'm also born again, I'm only going to die once, and that's when I leave this body?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then what happens then?" He says, "You spend the rest of eternity with Jesus." I said, "Are you seriously?" He goes, "Yeah, that's what heaven's all about, Dave." I said, "Well, I hope that one day I will get there. So what do I have to do to get there, Byron?" And through the course of the conversation, he said, "Believe. Repent of your sin. Confess it. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And so all you have to do is put your faith and trust in that, Dave. God will take care of the rest." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, that's it, man. That's when you went to church at Christmas, the baby Jesus came into this world for a purpose. And the purpose was to save you from your sin. And the reason why he went to the cross and suffered a brutal death, a man who knew no sin and was perfect, went to the cross and died on your behalf and took on all the sin of the world so that those who would come to him would be forgiven. And I'm like, okay, man, this is amazing, amazing. But I didn't know how to be all in. One day, I'm sitting on the balcony, and here's what's really interesting, Rick. There were 6 other couples that were on the same journey with me and Jan. So Jan joined me a little bit later that season. And now all of a sudden she's in on the equation. Danny and Mary Gospel are in on the equation. Tony and Alicia Gwynn are in on the equation. Mark and Debbie Thurman, who went to the big leagues. There were several of us. It was amazing. Jerry and Sheila DeSimone, these are all friends to this day.
Wow.
And we were all on the same journey. And we were in Little Rock, Arkansas, Rick, at the Roadway Inn. We were playing against the Cardinals, their AA farm team. And Danny Gospel, how ironic is this? I'm on the balcony, the second floor balcony outside the door of our room, my room, sitting on the balcony there. And I'm talking about the gospel with Danny Gospel. And so
Yeah.
we open up and we're reading I had a little Gideon's Pocket Bible, New Testament, red leather. I still have it. Red line, underline edition of it with the words of Jesus. And I'm in Ephesians chapter 2. And all of a sudden I read, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not by works, so that no man can boast. For we are his, in the New Living Translation, for we are his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he, God, prepared in advance for us to do. That sealed the deal. No works. Don't boast about it. It's all about him. It's his gift that he gives freely. And oh, by the way, in the honesty and sincerity of receiving that gift, good works will become the result of this, because you are now my masterpiece, and I'm turning you into that masterpiece over your lifetime. And I didn't understand that to the full as I do today, but it began the journey of being made brand new in Jesus. That's the other thing I didn't really fully understand back then, but I understand a whole lot better today, is that God didn't go to the cross to make me better. He went to the cross to give me a brand new life. And everything about me prior to the cross and putting my trust in him, he nailed to the cross. And so it went to the cross and it died with Jesus. The only reason why I struggle with it today is because I'm the one that chooses to resurrect what is dead in my flesh.
Yeah.
You know, but I want to live out of who I am in Christ. Christ in me, the hope of glory. It's no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives in me. That's the beauty of the gospel, man. He changes everything. And he's in the business of transforming hearts. And man, all you got to do is ask my wife whether or not he's transformed mine. And especially in the last 13 or 14 years, she doesn't know who I am. and she actually likes the guy that God is transforming today better than she did 14 years ago.
Before when she married you. Yeah.
Well, we were married 45 years ago.
I love that. That is so great that you could tell that story in such detail, and it's just such a wise moment here for all of us to observe that for your life. But now let's jump back into baseball just a little bit, because I want to talk about the sequence of events that happened in the career playing baseball. And you were at the height of it all at one point, because not only had you played with the Padres, but then you got traded to the Giants, which you didn't know was going to be a great thing, but it turned out to be a fantastic thing. And tell us about those major league days. You played with the Padres for what, 5-6 years, something like that?
Yeah, 5 years. So from Amarillo, I got to Hawaii the next year, and that was Triple A. And then on June 8th of 1982, I got called up to the big leagues. 2 days earlier, I became a dad, and my daughter Tiffany was born. So Jan and I had started a family, and right after that, I get a call. I mean, life couldn't have been any better. I mean, I become a dad, and I have this beautiful little girl. And 2 days later, I'm getting a call. You're going to the big leagues. I'm like, wow, this is awesome, And so I stuck in 82, went to the All-Star game in 83, World Series in 84, even though we lost second place, get really nice rings too. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then 87, get traded from the last place Padres to the first place Giants. And man, being with the Giants, looking back, because I work for them now. I've been on staff with them for 14 years as a community ambassador. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. But when I look back on those years, I don't know that I fully understood what it meant to wear a Giants uniform. I knew it was pretty special, but because you're there. Willie Mays walks in the clubhouse almost every day.
Whoa.
Willie McCovey walks in almost every day. When Orlando Cepeda is there, he's there. When Gaylord Perry is in, he's there. When Juan Marichal was there, he's in. Even before, Monty Irvin, years ago, he would show up in the early days of the 2000s when we moved into the new ballpark. Monty Irvin would show up, another great Giant. And so putting on that uniform for the Giants and now being with them in an pennant drive after coming from a last place team was really cool. And I have to tell you, I was on top of my game in that second half with the Giants. I mean, I pitched some of the best baseball that I had ever pitched. And actually, you know how when they talk about baseball today, when you reach 32 years of age, you're kind of on your downhill. I was just reaching the apex. And I mean, I had finally found a rhythm that I could duplicate and repeat over and over, no matter what. And it was the greatest feeling in the world. And so going into the postseason, I'm like, man, I am ready to just mow the Cardinals down. And game 2, throw a 2-hit shutout, and we win 5-0. Game 6, I go out against John Tudor, a great left-hander, and unfortunately we lose 1-0 in that game. And I pitched as well in that game as I did in the game 2, but just fell short on the victory. And so, we end the season disappointing, didn't get to the World Series, but man, 1988 is going to be my year. And so opening day, Roger Craig hands me the baseball. One of the greatest honors outside of maybe throwing a no-hitter is being given the baseball on opening day as a starting pitcher.
You're the star of the show, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And part of the reason why is because, it's not just about you, but you get to lead your team into the new year. And so we did that at Chavez Ravine, Dodger Stadium, opening day 1988. And I'll never forget, get out on the mound, man, all fired up. I'm the number one guy out of the chute for the Giants. Steve Sachs coming to the plate. My go-to pitch against him is a cutter on the inside part of the plate. I've broken that kid's bat so many times, it's not funny. But the only problem is, as he tells me the story about 10 years ago when I saw him, he knew I was coming in with my cutter. And this time he said, I'm going to step in the bucket and I'm going to drive it down the left field line. And sure enough, I throw the cutter on the first pitch of the game and he knocks it out of the park for a home run. and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I was like, I stood on the mound. I said, okay, God, is this what it's going to be like? But then I caught myself, and I don't know if it was God's voice or my voice, but I said, wait a minute. It's only one pitch. It's only one run. Dave, just shut him out from here and see if our ball club can score too.
Yeah.
And so from that point forward, I threw a 3-hit shutout and went 9 innings, and we defeated the Dodgers 5-1. But even more important, Rick, on that day, I hit a double off of Fernando off the right center field wall.
Oh my God.
And pitchers love bragging about their hitting. They can't do that today because there are no pitchers hitting. But back when I played, there was no DH in the National League. And man, I loved going to the plate. So being able to say I hit a double off of Fernando, quite frankly, might be a little bit more important than actually being the winning pitcher that day.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that was pretty special.
But then 1988, your year turned into be a very different kind of year than you expected it to be. Tell us what happened next.
Yeah, it was really hard because all of a sudden I just started having arm problems, totally unrelated to the cancer, and ended up with a partially torn bicep tendon. Going into September, it wasn't real good. I had tried to come back and pitch, and it was just really bad. And so anyway, they noticed, and I had noticed throughout the season that there was this lump on my arm. And by the end of the year, it just started getting really big, and it was half the size of a golf ball. And so as a result of that, I went in for an MRI, and my wife and I were in the examining room, and we were waiting for the doctors to come back and tell us what was going on. And as we were sitting there, obviously, we're not thinking cancer, because prior to that, conversation was around possible scar tissue calcifying and forming in a mass. Because when we pitch, when we throw a baseball, you tear down muscle fiber. And sometimes in tearing muscle fiber, it can calcify and it can harden and turn into a mass, and especially in your arm. And they likened it to Blocker's bruise that football players get. A lot of times you get hit by a 300-pound dude, it's more than just a bruise. Sometimes they're actually able to, with the impact, tear some mini muscle fibers there, and it can calcify and become a hard mass. So that's what we're thinking sitting in the examining room. All of a sudden, the doctors come down the hallway. The door to our room is open about 3 inches. And before they come in, they put the films up underneath the lights on the outside in the hallway. And they start talking about how they're going to communicate to us that I have cancer. And we hear this. And we hear it. And I look at Jan and I'm like, babe, did you just hear? She's just staring at me. And I go, you know what? We need to pray. And I said, I don't wax eloquently when I pray. I think simple prayers are just fine with God. And I don't close my eyes either. And I think God's okay with that too. Because when I close my eyes, my mind just goes off into space someplace else. And oftentimes I'm not even focused on the prayer. And so I'm standing there with my eyes open, and I just said, God, I have absolutely no idea with what we are about to face. But whatever it is, all I ask is that you give us the strength to endure. That's all I ask. And they came in and confirmed that, in fact, I had cancer. And then the doctor looked at us and said, outside of a miracle, you'll never pitch again. And I was sitting there thinking, pitch? I just want to know if I'm going to live. Yeah. And if I die from this disease, I'm sitting there thinking I'm in a totally different world now, not paying any attention. And I'm thinking, if I die from this disease, who's going to marry my wife? I mean, an important question from me, from my perspective. And then I said, and is that guy going to love my kids and my wife as much as I do? But Rick, then here's what came into my mind. Oh my gosh, will he love them more because I know who I am? So yes, just a kind of 33,000 foot level view of my journey as a follower in Christ during my career for 6 years prior to that point. It ebbed and flowed just like everybody else. Some days were good in reading, and other days there was no reading. Some days were good in prayer, other days there was no prayer. You get caught up in the trappings of the world, the stuff of the world, and you realize it's important, but somehow you just get distracted. And so you remember that, and then you jump right back in. And the beauty of what I'm learning today at 68 is my reading the Bible, my praying, my studying, all those things, none of them get me into heaven. The only thing that gets me into heaven is Jesus on the cross and the empty tomb. And what I needed to understand was, I don't need to do these things as a list of things to do, because that's been my whole life story as an athlete. You check off the list to please the people you perform for. And I was checking off the list to please God, who I was performing for. The worst part in all of that, Rick, was that I was miserable in my performance. And the reason why was I could never live up to the expectations that I thought God was placing on me. And the truth was, I was the one that was putting those expectations on me, not God. And
Wow.
all of a sudden, I woke up one day and I realized God doesn't ask me to check off a list. He invites me into a way of life. And that way of life is about two things: loving Him with everything I've got and my neighbor as myself. And so what I came to realize was when I read the Bible, I fall more in love with the one I'm reading about.
Boy.
When I know my wife more, and I get to and see the beautiful things about her because I'm with her and I'm learning about her by being with her, I fall more in love with her. When I talk to her and she talks with me and we engage, I fall more in love with her through our conversations. So why not talk with God and fall more in love with God through our conversations with Him? You know, studying the Bible is really simply about learning more about the one that I love and the one that loves me more than I can comprehend. And so all of a sudden, the years have taught me that there are intersections in life as a follower of Christ where God gets your attention. Unfortunately, most of those times are through adversity or some kind of suffering. But He gets our attention, and what He simply wants is more of us so that we can get more of Him. But He's always going to be giving us Himself totally, not because we decided to check in with Him and see how things are going. See, He didn't do that with us. He's always there.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
It's just when we make too much noise, we can't hear that He's there. We can't see that He's there because we're so distracted by all the other stuff. That's why Jesus says, fix our eyes on Him, the author and perfecter of our faith. And He'll give us the strength to endure, which is what I asked.
And endure you did, as a matter of fact. That miracle of playing baseball again actually came true. You did realize that miracle.
Yes.
And that's the next part of this amazing story. So you were not supposed to maybe ever pitch again. Some people said maybe you should wait a year or two, but none of that happened. What happened next, Dave?
10 months later, after intense rehabilitation and a lot of bloody noses, figuratively speaking, you know, where you kind of run into a wall and you just can't break through, all of a sudden, and that was through the encouragement of other people, including the Giants organization, my family, my teammates. All of a sudden, I found myself in Candlestick Park on August 10th, 1989, standing on the mound, getting ready to pitch again against the Cincinnati Reds. And all I could hear was, outside of a miracle, Dave, you'll never pitch again. Because I was standing there on the mound going, oh my gosh, God, I guess you're the one that's really in control here because I'm here pitching and the doctors were wrong. And so, man,
The
what a
comeback
beautiful
kid.
day.
Yes.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful day. It was an incredible experience. You know, it was just overwhelming, and I was so thankful. I remember standing on the mound and stepping back and acknowledging the fans and their cheering for me, and it was just so beautiful. And I was so grateful because I knew that a big part of the reason why I was standing there was because God used them in their support of me through all the mail that we received saying, we're praying for you, we're wishing you well. And so I stood there and I was just so thankful. And all I could hear was, give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because He's given us His Son, Jesus Christ. And I was like, oh my gosh, God, I am so grateful for this moment. And then I stood there and I went, okay, game on. Umpire's going to say play ball. Said play ball. I threw the first pitch, threw a ball so that we could keep it, and then proceeded to go 8 full innings and throw 93 pitches to a victory where the Giants won that day 4-3. And man, it was amazing. Press conference after that game, I was standing there. There was a story that was wrapped around my story with a little boy by the name of Alex Lajos. He was battling for his life. He had leukemia. And I had met him prior to the comeback game. And on that day, the local radio station said, hey, San Francisco Giants Bay Area fans, we're going to support little Alex by donating money towards his cause for every pitch that Dave throws that day. And so on that day, those 93 pitches raised over $200,000 to help his mom and dad offset the costs of people coming forward to donate blood, which they said they would pay for, whoever came forward. And some 7,000 people came forward. So you're looking at $75 a head, almost over $500,000. And that day, several $100,000 was raised to help this little boy. So I'm standing in the press conference, and he comes into the press conference. So I grab him and I'm holding him in my arm, and I have this picture in our office here. I have this picture of me holding Alex, and I'll never forget. Nobody was asking a question, and I said, a couple people started asking questions. I said, could we please stop just for a moment? And I want to say something. I just want to give this moment to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and thank him for giving me another chance. And I want to give him all the glory. And then we went into asking questions about my cutter, about my fastball, whatever, And I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
Okay. 5 days later, we're in Montreal. Now I'm back in the saddle. I'm with my teammates. I'm not on the sidelines anymore. I'm actually wearing my uniform. I'm now a part of the 25-man roster. It feels so good, Rick. And all of a sudden, now the game starts. And we're in the 6th inning, and I'm rolling. Everything's going great. We're winning 2-1. And Tim Raines is at the plate, and I rear back to throw a fastball, and my left arm snaps in half. I go falling to the ground, and I'm laying on the ground, and all I could hear were Bob Knepper's words. I had had lunch with him about 5 hours earlier, pre-game meal. And he was a brother in Christ and a teammate at that time. And all I could hear were his words, because at that lunch, he said, Dave, it's not the miracle of the comeback. It's the miracle of salvation that occurred in your life in 1981 in Amarillo, Texas. And God is providing a platform for you through baseball to share his love with those who hurt. And as I laid on the ground, Rick, those words were the only words I could hear. I was overwhelmed. Now, I almost went into shock. But when I came out of shock, I was like, God, what are you up to? This is crazy. Why did I had 3 minor league games before the comeback game. Why did my arm break in one of those minor league games? Why did my arm break during rehab? Why didn't it break in the comeback game? And why did it break 5 days afterwards? Because the whole world got to see it. The whole world. So now I'm sitting in a suite at the hotel the next morning, broken arm in a sling, and Al Rosen asks me to come up for a press conference before I leave. Al was the president and GM of the Giants at the time. So I go up there. Scotty Gereltz and Bob Knepper follow me up, and I'm standing there in his suite in front of all these reporters. Had to be at least a dozen of them sitting in there. And nobody's asking me any question. And I'm just standing, I'm like, okay, guys, I got to go catch a plane. And so all of a sudden, Lowell Cohen from the Sporting Green in San Francisco raises his hand and he goes, Dave, so where is your God now? And I stood there, Rick, and I went, oh my, in my mind, I mean, I've got a stoic face. In my mind, I'm going, oh my gosh, God, you just opened the door for a Mack truck to go through. I don't want to mess this up.
I got to say the right thing right now.
I looked at Lowell and I went, he hasn't gone anywhere, Lowell. He still lives right here in my heart. The only thing that's changed are my circumstances. And now I have to just trust him to give me the strength to endure this next phase. And you could hear a pin drop. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? Thank you, Holy Spirit. That was amazing. So anyway, off I went to San Francisco to meet the doctors there. And obviously there was concern that the cancer had come back. And so that that November, right before Thanksgiving, rather ironic, singing Give Thanks with a Grateful Heart. And now it's November and I'm before Thanksgiving saying it's time for me to retire. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there in the house and I'm calling the Giants and saying, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to announce my retirement. And you know what was amazing about the Giants? And I don't know that very many people are aware of this, but they actually offered me a contract, even when they knew that more than likely I wouldn't come back and play.
Really?
And I declined, and I thanked them, but I said I just wouldn't feel right being able to do that. And that's my recollection.
There was a phase of depression, though, that followed all of that, because now they've actually the chosen course of action was to remove the arm at the shoulder, above the shoulder.
Yeah.
And so that had to be devastating. The whole concept of being a left-handed pitcher and now having no left hand and or arm, that's kind of sent you into an emotional spiral for a period of time. It was not just a week or two. It was, as you describe it, 30 months.
Yeah. It was a very difficult period of time. I find it really interesting when people say Christians shouldn't be depressed or don't get depressed. I just shake my head when I hear those terms, because you know what, we're human, and sometimes we're going to experience and go through things that, quite frankly, we can't endure. When the cancer kept coming back and it eventually got to the point where after a staph infection for 10 months, I mean, Rick, it was like, I couldn't use my arm. Let me put it this way. I would go to sign baseball cards, being left-handed. I literally would have to grab my hand, pick it up, put it on the desk, put the pen in my hand, and hope that I could write my name legibly. And so when it got to the point when the doctor said it's time to remove your left arm and shoulder, I was like, let's get rid of this thing. It has become a nuisance. It hurts when people hit me. It hurts. So anybody that bumped up against me, whatever, it was always pain. And so I just got to the point where I was ready for it to be gone. I'll never forget the morning of the surgery, the amputation. My parents are with me. My wife's there with me. On my way out on the gurney to the operating room, I picked up my left hand, and I should have never done this. But I picked it up and I waved it to my family and said, goodbye, everybody. My mom was so mad at me. She's like, how could you do that, Dave? And I was like, Mom, I'm sorry, man, but I can't wait to get rid of it. And so anyway, off I go, and the arm and the shoulder come off. I get out of recovery. I go to my room. The next day, I want to get out of bed and I want to walk, because the challenge was to be able to walk a mile on the 10th floor. And that was 16 laps. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to be able to do that. And it was an intense surgery. And so I tried to get out of bed and go into the bathroom and look in the mirror to see what it was like, because I couldn't tell. I needed to see it. I needed to visualize it. So I go to get out of bed and almost fell out of bed. And I was able to grab myself and scoot back up in bed, and I pushed the button, and the nurse comes running in. She goes, what's wrong? I said, well, I tried to get out of bed and almost fell out. She goes, don't you ever do that again. That's what that button's for. If you need anything, you call me and I come and help you. I said, I'm sorry. Sorry. So I said, could you please get me out of bed? I said, I really want to see. She goes, okay. So we got out of bed, and she walked me over to the bathroom. I was stable enough. I didn't feel like passing out or doing anything like that, because that's what happened when I tried to get out of bed. I got really dizzy. So now I'm standing there, and I pick my head up and I look into the mirror, and Rick, it was like, whoa. So this is what a full quarter amputation looks like. And I'll never forget this. I looked in the mirror and I said, well, okay, God, if this is the deck of cards you played for me, then this is what I got to live with. Let's go. I'll never forget saying that. And I thought to myself, now that I've gotten rid of my arm, all the struggles in the past since retiring and going through all the surgeries that were really hard, going through the radiation that was really hard, going through the staph infection that was really hard, the ups and downs of life, spiritually, physically, emotionally. Now you get rid of my arm and all my problems are going to be gone. And 3 weeks out, I was in counseling with my wife, admitting that I was depressed and struggling with my identity. And for the next 30 months, Jan and I went through counseling, as you said. And I know it was a long way of getting there, but the reality was learning how to communicate my pain was the greatest gift that God gave me in setting me free from that pain. Because what I was doing was stuffing it because I didn't want people to see my weakness. And what I realized was what the scriptures taught me. And that was, my power is made perfect in weakness. And so I learned that in my weakness, I could actually trust in his power to help me endure what I had to face. And as a result of that, I started, and what's really ironic about that, I was traveling the country telling my story as a quote unquote professional communicator. and I had no clue how to communicate. Most men don't, Rick. Yeah. Most men don't. That's why a lot of men have problems with their marriages. Wives are begging them for them to talk. What's going on inside? How was your day at work? Don't come home and say I'm fine and hide everything. That's why I'm here. That's why we're married. I'm the closest one to you. I should be the one you want to tell. Yeah. Because no matter whether you're weak or strong, I'm going to love you. And so I started learning to do that. And then the first 18 months were with Jan going through the counseling. The last 12 months were with an anger management counselor who taught me how to manage my anger. And it was one of the greatest gifts that God has ever given me through Gary Oliver, who is a Christian counselor. I was so grateful for that.
Wow. And so advice to someone who has struggles, whether it be physical struggles, mental struggles, career struggles, marriage struggles, would be that what would your advice be to someone who's listening to it's going through some stuff?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to recognize when you're in the midst of that struggle, is to recognize people around you that love you and care for you, that you trust, that you can share and go into that place. But what you have to promise yourself when you go into that place is that they're not there to fix you, and you don't want them there to fix you. You want them there to give you a safe place to be able to process this stuff with God. But if that's difficult in doing, then the next step is not to be afraid to seek professional help.
All right. And, we're getting close to, we probably need to wrap this up. But one question I always like to ask folks like yourself is, do you have any advice or encouragement for people? And there are those in our audience who are seekers, not necessarily believers, either seekers or new believers, that you could pass along as encouragement to them.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that this morning. I was sitting outside and I was watching the birds, and I have this beautiful view of the valley of Phoenix. And I just look around and I see God's incredible creation. And if you're out there and you're seeking, you can't deny that there had to be a creator. I mean, there's just too much to this creation to deny the reality of that. And yet some will, and that's okay. You can't force people to think a certain way. And I think that's the beauty of Christianity. Nobody's trying to force you to think anyway. We just want to introduce you to the one that loves you more than you can comprehend, so you can experience a life that is the greatest life on this planet.
Dave Dravecky, my God, you're preaching the word, my friend. You are so inspiring. I love your enthusiasm and love for the Lord. And I thank you so much for taking this afternoon and spending an hour with us and talking about Jesus, talking about your life, the struggles of your life, the mountaintops of your life. And it has just been a true pleasure to have this time to converse with you. Thank you so, so much.
You're welcome, Rick. It's been a pleasure to be able to visit with you too.
Dave Dravecky absolutely oozes with his love of life and his love of Jesus, and his story reverberates whenever he lights up to tell that story. One of our best guests yet. Yes, it was Dave Dravecky. Thanks for sharing your day with us on Amazing Greats today. Your support is truly appreciated, and I hope you found this episode to be interesting, encouraging, and useful. And until next time, God bless.